Greetings, folks. It's Uncle Bill here, and we're going to be talking about Finding Argento Part 3, when Argento hits the 90s. And can I just say, maybe this is not the best of Argento's work, but how many huge filmmakers just hit a brick wall in the 90s? Like, how many horror filmmakers? Like, the only dude that made it out of the 90s unscathed would have been Craven, because he made Scream. But if you think about it, like Romero's work in the 90s, I mean, there's some gems in there, man. Like, Monkey Shines and, well, shit, Monkey Shines might not. Bruiser, no. Let's see. Never mind. And Carpenter. Now, Carpenter might have come closest to pulling out some really, really honest to God hidden gems in the 90s. Like In the Mouth of Madness, to me, is like a masterpiece, but people shit on his 90s stuff, and it does go progressively downhill in the 90s. I'm not gonna lie. Carpenter stuff does, it really does, but I mean, there's still some good stuff in there too. I think Ghost of Mars is in the 2000s. I pray that it is. So he's had some good stuff. Tobe Hooper. I think Spontaneous Combustion might be in the 90s. Maybe late 80s, early 90s. I'm trying to think of what else he would have done in the 90s. It's like he didn't even exist in the 90s almost. But anyway, point that I'm trying to make is that you really can't blame Argento completely for some of these films, because something about that decade just destroyed a lot of filmmakers, a lot of major players in horror in the 80s. When they hit the 90s, and just horror in general in the 90s, honestly, just completely shit the bed. And I think all of them. And with the exception, I mean, Craven wasn't doing too great up until he made Scream, to be honest. But with the exception of Craven, who pulled that one out. So I'm excited though, because these are the films that not a lot of people talk about. The stuff from the 90s doesn't get talked about nearly like Suspiria or Deep Red or any of those movies. Like, these movies are considered kind of like bottom of the barrel type of stuff for Argento. But regardless, we're going to go through them. And I've rewatched several of these, and I'm going to talk about that. But I'm also going to talk about one in particular that's in the 90s that I did not get a chance to rewatch. But I don't honestly even consider it to be it's not a feature film. But the one that I'm not going to be doing is Two Evil Eyes, because number one, it's not like a real film for Argento. It's like an hour-long anthology thing that he did with Romero. But number two, I just didn't get a chance to rewatch it, so I didn't know how I was going to talk about it, because it's been probably 10 years since I watched that. But I tell you, though, I rewatched the majority of everything else that he did, and I got some interesting thoughts, I think, about this decade. You also remember, though, the people that have been watching this through the whole thing, is that we didn't actually get up to the 90s last time. We got to the mid-80s, so we're actually going to go from the mid-80s all the way through the 90s. So let's start with this 1985's Phenomena, which this is the Synapse steelbook, and on the back is the version that people would know from video stores, which is Creepers. That's the Creepers video poster, which I actually have this poster, and it's pretty kick-ass. But Jennifer Connelly's on this, and Jennifer Connelly's in the film. She is an interesting choice to play this character. I can't really figure out why Argento picked her, but he did, and I believe she was 16 at the time this movie was made, and we'll get into that a little bit in a second about why that's kind of creepy in this movie. But so the story of this, of Phenomena, for those who haven't seen it, this is more like a movie like Suspiria. In fact, it kind of reminds me of like a remake of Suspiria. The more I was thinking about it, like it's got the same basic story, except there's not, the supernatural element that is there. It's just different. It's a different supernatural element. So two kind of competing stories are going on. You got this kind of murder mystery where this serial killer is running around killing all these people, and then you've got this young girl who ends up living in this dorm, and she has the power to control insects with her mind. And it kind of seems like he wanted to combine Giallo with like Suspiria, and it succeeds and fails at the same time. There's parts of it that succeed and parts of it that fail. So while you're going through the movie, you got like some really cool kind of chase scenes and scenes of a killer kind of stalking somebody. And it's one of those ones where you don't, it's kind of like the black glove killer kind of thing. And then that's kind of interspliced with Jennifer Connelly figuring out that she's got this magical power. And while she's running away from this dorm, she runs into this professor played by Donald Pleasance. Now, this is both the best and the worst part of this movie. So, actually, the interaction between Donald Pleasance and Jennifer Connelly is pretty good. It's probably the best part, acting-wise, of the whole movie. But it's like Donald Pleasance has some sort of weird accent, and I don't know what it's like. Maybe Scottish, maybe Irish. I'm not sure what kind of accent he's trying to pull off. But it's just so freaking stilted that it kind of takes you out of the performance. But Donald Pleasance is in this, and he's researching all these bugs. He's an entomologist, I believe, and he has a pet monkey. I have no idea why. I don't know if that was like a thing. Maybe it was a thing because Clint Eastwood had like a pet monkey. But, he's got a pet monkey. So, whatever. But the pet monkey loves him and adores him and comes into play in a big way at the end of this film. I guess it's not a monkey really per se. It's like, what do you call those things? Is it like an orangutan or I don't know. It's a simian of some kind. Anyway, so Daria Nicolodi is in this too, and I think that they were still on decent terms at this time, and she plays a very, very interesting role in this movie as well, and probably one of her best roles. Probably the best use of her playing one particular kind of role that I've seen in any of these films. So that's one thing that works. Let's talk about some of the things that don't work. The biggest problem in this movie for me is the soundtrack, which I love. I love the score part. Don't get me wrong. The score is like the operatic kind of thing that goes through it. But for some reason, I guess maybe because of demons or I'm not sure, but he was really big into using heavy metal songs in his movies. And even though they don't really belong in this movie, and they don't, and like the scenes that actually have the metal songs in them are just, it's really weirdly placed. There's a Motorhead song and an Iron Maiden song in this. And they're doing some like just random scenes where she's running around like running, and they're dropped in and they don't fit in the movie. That's like one of the biggest problems for me in this. One of the biggest high points for me in this is the design of the movie in terms of like the set pieces and just the art direction, the way that Jennifer Connelly looks, and the way that like Argento filmed her scenes, especially, is very very haunting. And especially when she's controlling the insects and things like that too. There's only one scene I can think of that's kind of silly, where it's like all the insects take over this like building, and you can clearly tell that that's some bullshit, like, matte something, like the way that they did it. But other than that, like, just the design of the movie looks really really good. It's like Suspiria comparisons, could be drawn. The story of the movie is pretty basic and pretty, as you go along further in the movie, nonsensical. But it's not horrible. The tone of the movie changes kind of midway through it as well. Sometimes it tries to be funny. Sometimes it's dead serious. Sometimes it's like a buddy movie with him or with her and Donald Pleasance. Um, it's very, very kind of all over the place. Yeah, this is a good. I didn't think about this, but this is a good point. X-Ray Punch says, feels like the same universe as Suspiria, but Jennifer is the good witch. That may have actually been his intention. I'm not sure, because it definitely seems like he wanted to combine Suspiria into something else with this movie. It just has that same look and feel to it. The ending, I would love. This is like, in all these that I've done, um, I have not given away anything or done any spoilers, but I swear to God, like, I would love to talk about the ending of this movie, because it's like 5 levels of batshit insane. Um, and it comes out of nowhere too. Like, you kind of know something's getting ready to happen. Not so I'll try to talk about it without giving it away, but you kind of know that there's going to be some sort of big reveal at the end of this movie, right? And there's actually two big reveals. You don't know what it's going to be, and when it gets to it, at least for me anyway, I was like, "Holy shit, that's crazy and awesome at the same time!" Like, kind of corny, kind of stupid, but also like, you just can't even believe that he would do something like that. So, and that's the first crazy shit that happens when the two reveals happen in the movie. So if you haven't seen it, there's going to be two major reveals, and then like the end of the movie, which I believe is even more insane than the reveals, because you're like, how is she going to get out of this? Oh, well, yeah, something crazy. I mean, I really want to spoil it, man, but like, I'm sure there are people in here that have not seen this movie, and it's too great. So, but if you haven't seen Phenomena, like, it's a crazy mix of a bunch of different movies, man. Like, um, like I said, I think it's like Deep Red and Suspiria kind of grinded together with some sort of crazy ass, like, I don't know, like, supernatural bug infested, um, creepy kids shit thrown in there. Yeah, yeah. I'm sure that there's. I'll get to a couple of these things about people are commenting about Phenomena. I'm sure there is, and one of her shitty early movies. I think that she's not a big fan of this movie because, number one, she got a piece of her finger bitten off by the chimpanzee in it. But number two, because like she's not very good in it. I mean, she's great, I guess, for a 16-year-old, but like, it's very kind of wooden performance. Like, the thing that saves it is her look. Like, and that's really all that matters in these early Argento movies, in the 80s, and 70s and 80s, especially, is the look and like the art design of everything. And she fits into that world perfectly. Um, but the thing about it, that also doesn't work about that performance is I could clearly tell that Argento wanted to do something sexual with Jennifer Connelly, but like couldn't. There's scenes in the movie where she's wearing stuff that you like should not, like gowns and these kind of things that she should not be wearing whatsoever. And you could tell that he wanted to pull an Asia Argento and just film some shit like that, but he couldn't. But man, that's like the, I don't know. That to me is like one of the worst parts about the movie, but it's in there. How you doing, Christian Hannah? It's good to have you in here, man. And Carter Derdention, I'm glad that you're liking this series. And Jennifer looks like a drawing come to life. She really does. That's the one thing about this movie too. Is there's something about her aesthetic in the movie that looks like a freaking comic book or something, and I think that fits in pretty well with like the rest of the movie, because it is almost like a comic book come to life style movie. But yeah, I mean, unless I want to talk about the end of the movie, which I really fucking want to talk about the end of this movie. Really, really bad. Okay, so if you haven't seen this movie, now would be the time for you to just turn this shit off, mute it, do something, because it's just too good to not talk about. I'll give you a second to do whatever you need to do. Okay, so the end of the movie is Daria Nicolodi has a son. I'm assuming it's her fucking son. I can't really remember. Who has some sort of disorder, and I think it's called Patou or something like that syndrome. It's like a genetic disorder. And that's where Argento got the idea. And he's this creepy little freaking kid who is the one responsible for a lot of these murders and is just running around with flies and shit all over him. There's a scene where it like shows a close-up of his mouth, and he's got this little like rat mouth, and there's like all this drool coming out of it and everything. And it's just it's so bad that it's great. Like, that's the only thing I can say about it. It's fucking horrible, but amazing at the same time. Like, I don't know how else to say it. But what makes it even more amazing is towards the end of the film, when like you think all hope is lost and Daria Nicolodi's character comes back to life after you think that she's dead, then the fucking chimpanzee comes out of nowhere with a straight razor and kills her ass. I cannot think of another movie that has a more insane ending, like, or several different endings. I'm not sure like how you would say that. But my God, man, that's a work of art, the end of that movie. And I mean that both sarcastically and seriously at the same time. Like, I'm not even sure how I mean it. It's too bad. It kind of transcends bad into good. So if you have not seen Phenomena, and I imagine most people in here have, please, for the love of God, see Phenomena. So I'll take a couple of questions, I guess, if anybody wants, or comments before I go on to 1987's Opera, which is a big change in tone from Phenomena. Like, you talk about two movies that are kind of polar opposite of each other. So we got, let's see here. Ice Ice Boogie said Jennifer Connelly is perfect in every way. Career Opportunities proves it. By the way, Career Opportunities was my generation's like Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Like, when you saw her in that movie, it was like, holy shit. Let's see. And we got the actor who played the son was also the demon. Oh my God. The demon boy in Demons 2. I'll be damned, I did not know that. Oh yeah, I actually did read about this too, X-Ray Punch. He wanted to do Phenomena 2, and what was it that happened? Like, I don't know if it was just, oh, there was some sort of contract he had with another studio where he had to do something besides that, I think. And Jennifer Connelly looked phenomenal in The Rocketeer. God Almighty, that's a movie I haven't thought of in freaking forever. Um, yeah, The Rocketeer. She did look amazing in that. That's a movie I need to go back and watch. It's 90s gold right there. That was before Marvel and DC superhero movies just choked the life out of everything. Yes, it is, Ice Ice Buoy. It's a very, very underrated movie. Okay, but buy this. This may be out of print now, but if you can get it somehow, this steel book that Synapse put out, buy it, please, because it's amazing. And it comes with this neat shit. And the artwork is awesome. So, that is phenomenal. Next up is 1987's Opera. Now, Opera to me was like, a lot of people think it's his return to form. And a lot of people say that it's his last great movie. So I don't know, like, how you feel about it. As we talk about some of these other films from the 90s, but it definitely feels more like some of the earlier movies than anything that comes after this. Like, I think the big part of the problem that after this is that he moves to the U.S. for a while, and that becomes an issue in some of these movies. But this is the last one that looks like an Argento film, man. And a really, really old school style one at that. So, okay, the plot is you got Betty, who is an opera singer, and there is a production of Macbeth in which the lead gets, I believe she gets hit by a car, and so she decides she's going to accept the lead role, and in doing so, she kind of also accepts this kind of psychopath stalker dude that is following around the whole movie and killing different people that she's associated with, which is very, very familiar from an Argento movie. That's pretty much the plot of like the first, well, before you get to Suspiria, the first, all those films is pretty much the plot. Like, somebody comes in contact with somebody that they really shouldn't, and they end up becoming like dragged into this world where they're killing off all these people, and you know, you don't even know kind of the backstory or anything. Yeah, some people are pointing out some good stuff about this too, and the biggest problem about this movie for me is just exactly what somebody just said, which is it's not. It doesn't really do anything great to me. Like, it's not a great giallo because you can kind of figure out who the killer is pretty quick. And it's definitely not like a great, you know, supernatural, fantastical kind of movie. Like, it doesn't do anything. And it's got like one of my least favorite performances by anybody in any Argento film, which is that fucking guy, I can't think of his name, who was in Copycat, plays like her boyfriend or some sort of like male interest in it. Now, granted, his death scene in the movie is pretty spectacular, but I just cannot stand that guy. I mean, he was cringeworthy to me in Copycat, even though I love that movie. But in this movie, which is like one of his earliest movies, it is painful to watch that guy. Now, I won't say the same about that for the lead actress, who's actually like one of my favorite leads. Probably even more so like Jennifer Harper or some of those people too. Maybe not as much as like, you know, Nickelodeon, but Christina Marsalek is the lead in this film. And she's the one that everybody always knows from this movie because, all the posters and, the thing with the needles in the eyes and the things with the headband tied around it, it's all her. But Nickelodeon's in this too. And this, I believe, might be the first one that he uses Corlina Cataldi Tassani, she was in a bunch of movies. Like, I think that I don't know this for certain. I'm just like, this is just coming out of my ass. But I think that she might have been like a replacement per se for Daria Nicolodi, because it's like all of a sudden she just shows up. Nobody else does this, by the way, except for his daughter. But nobody else just randomly shows up in like multiple different of his films. And she does throughout this period of time. And it's also throughout this period of time where they separate. And it's just odd to me. I always kind of wondered about that. Because, she's got a good look, but she's not a great actress. So, anyway. Point about this film that somebody just made that I 100% agree with. It may have some of the best death scenes of any of his films. And I agree with that. It's got some great return to point of view slash and stalk kind of scenes. It's got some really, really good tension, especially the part where, she's tied up and her eyes are have the needles in them to where she can't shut her eyes. She has to watch what's getting ready to happen. Jesus, there's some good stuff in this. But overall, I found it, going back and watching it because I hadn't seen it in years and years and years, I found it to be, I found it to be a little bit dull, to be honest. And I actually really, really I think it might have been where I watched Phenomena and then this, back to back. You just can't capture the same insane energy from Phenomena in the next film. But then Opera is more like his previous film, so people are going to like that more than Phenomena. But I happen to like Phenomena better, even though I really didn't think I would going back into it and rewatching it. But Opera is for the people that really, really love his early stuff. And he has a certain style in those movies that's captured here. And Phenomena is a completely different, I don't even know how to explain it, man. Phenomena is like the Saint Anger of Argento movies. Being that it comes out of nowhere and it's not like anything else that they've done, and it's got a trash can for a snare drum. No, but it is very, very unique and very odd. Yes, Phenomena was his Malignant, and Opera was a return to, was a return to classic style Argento. So, when James Wan makes The Conjuring 50 or whatever, then that will be the equivalent to Opera. I guess that's the best way to say it. So, before I move on from 1987's Opera, does anybody have any questions, comments, random thoughts about Opera? Because now it gets into the 90s, and I had to go back and rewatch these, because I was just curious. Are these as bad as I thought, or as I remember them to be? And the answer is both yes and no, I guess. Oh, it's good that you're on here, man. Opera needed tighter editing. Argento was going through personal issues at the time. He let a lot of those issues bleed onto the screen. Yeah, and when we talk about 1993's Trauma, he really, really lets a lot of his personal issues bleed onto the screen. And that, I think he always kind of did that. It's just that it was for the betterment in his early stuff. And then as you get later on, it's yeah, you probably could have just left a lot of that shit out or tightened it up a little bit. Let's see here. American Giallo vids in the future. I've seen a lot of those, and yeah, that's not a bad idea. But after I get done with the next one, which is the last one, I'll tell you what I'm going to do next. Some people may have already guessed it. Okay. So 1987's Opera. I don't think that that movie is as divisive as this next movie, which is 1993's Trauma, which I have in the 5-pack. I could not find this fucking steelbook, but I have it. The Dario Argento 5-pack that Anchor Bay put out that has Trauma and Tenebrae and The Card Player and Do You Like Hitchcock? It's got all those in it. And this is where I first saw it. I loved all those movies, by the way. Like, spoiler, but I don't know. People shit on that set and those movies, but I think they're all gold. Anyway, so speaking of like Argento going like personal and actually, you know, it feels like to me, based on what I've read about this and watching this movie, that he took a lot of shit that was going on in his life at that time and just made it into kind of like a cathartic murder mystery of shit that he might have wanted to do at that time. So, yeah, and it's about a young girl. By the way, this is the first time that he really uses Asia Argento as like a lead actress in any of his films. So she's this young, disturbed, suicidal, and anorexic girl who is going through all this stuff, and she meets up with this other guy who I believe was her boyfriend or her ex-boyfriend or something like that. And they are going to try to figure out, like, there's this series of murders that's going on, and as usual, like, she has some sort of like hidden knowledge of these murders, and she's not really this is a big theme for Argento's movies, is people having this hidden knowledge of these murders and not really being aware that they have this knowledge until later on in the movie. And so, you know, they're seeking out to try to stop this person from completing all these tasks. And so a couple things about this movie. Asia Argento is very, very young in this movie, just like Jennifer Connelly in Phenomenon. I don't think it was like her best performance, but it's not like a horrible performance. But you can tell like she was either scared shitless or something was going on. So I don't know. But the cool part about it was that they brought in Savini, which is like every time I see a movie that has Savini in it, like I get excited because I still think, despite like him being crazy, that despite his flaws, that he was the best at what he did. And he, you know, Argento had the design for this thing, which was like an electronic garrote, basically an electric garrote, which it's this little machine with like a wire on it. They press a button and it like tightens around somebody's neck and like decapitates them. So, you know, that's the killer's MO, is that they're going around and they're collecting all these people's heads in the beginning of this movie. But the problem to me is that Savini, when I think about Savini, I think about gore, and there's no gore in this movie whatsoever. I was really taken aback by that because I don't think Savini was ever the best like mask maker, like sculptor, and that's all he really did in this movie. And it's okay, but like they could have hired a million different people to do what he did that would have probably been better. And there's very little like gore in this movie. It's just a bunch of decapitations that you can see sometimes on screen, sometimes off screen, and sometimes with visual effects that are just hilariously dated from the 90s. But anyway, the reason why I say that this is a really like personal movie and like kind of everything he puts up on the screen is because, number one, the whole anorexia psychiatric problems thing, it turns out that was truly going on with his stepdaughter at the time, which was Daria Nicolodi's daughter from a different marriage. That was going on, and there's all kinds of stuff in this movie that really shits on like the medical profession and the psychiatric profession. I mean, you come to find out that, you know, that very much like in Malignant and before that Basket Case, like one of the things that was going on was like this serial killer was stalking this certain group of people that were doctors and nurses that were associated with this event that happened. And so, that's always been a big trope in these movies too. And but anyway, like very, very personal because I feel like it was his aim at like the medical profession and doctors and things in general who could not help his stepdaughter and maybe even his daughter. I'm not entirely sure. But it definitely feels personal because they are kind of shit on and systematically murdered in this movie as well. And the twist is a pretty decent twist. I actually liked the ending. I didn't mind the ending. I liked the twist, and I got to say that Piper Laurie she's great in this movie, and she's great in every movie that she's in. I love to watch her because she plays such a great like range of roles, and if you need somebody to play batshit insane, then she's like a go-to. So Piper Laurie is really cool in this movie too. Um, a lot of people complain that this movie is too American, and by that I mean that it looks like way too bland, and the scenery and the backgrounds and all that are just way too boring. And I kind of agree with that. Like he moves to America to make this movie, winds up in Minneapolis, I think, and makes this and it just like all the vibrant colors and all of the just amazing set pieces that you're used to seeing from Argento and all those other movies. Just, fucking Minneapolis is not the place to go. You go from like, Rome and all these places to Minneapolis, and it's just not the same. So it comes off looking very much like an episode of like CSI or Forensic Files, or not Forensic Files, but Forensic Minds or whatever that show's called. Like it looks very just standard 90s cop drama movie. The score in it is bad, but that's because they wouldn't let him use Claudio Simonetti, and they made him pick like another guy. I forget his name, Pinot Noir, fucking I don't know, Dino Pinot, one of those guys. But the score is just painfully dull, just kind of like the cinematography in the film. And it's funny too, though, because people criticize Argento for not making movies based on characters and, making movies based on set pieces and places and the supernatural and not caring about the characters. But then he makes this movie, which is completely like a character-based story, and they shit all over this movie too. And it's like, I don't think that these kind of movies are his strong suit. I don't think that character-based dramas are his strong suit. I'll just say that right now. I think that he would have been a lot better when in the world of the supernatural is kind of where he dwells and does his best work. But it's not a bad film by any stretch of the imagination. And it's got some great. I actually love the idea of this killer who has this machine, which is just electric. It's such a simple idea, but so like terrifying at the same time that it's got a garrote on it, and presses a button and it like contracts it to the point where it just like cuts somebody's head off. Another cool thing about it is there are more talking decapitated heads in this movie than I believe per capita in any other movie. So there's several different scenes where someone gets decapitated and their head's laying there and it starts to talk and say things. In fact, it's like a big plot point in the movie. Like a guy walks in on somebody who's just been decapitated and the head is like trying to give him clues about who the fuck it is. It's like, it's like, I don't think that ever has happened in history, but it happens like 3 or 4 times in this movie, which is just great. Some other good points about it. There's some good acting from a couple different people. Asia Argento is not probably one of those people, but Brad Dourif, Piper Laurie, whoever the hell the boyfriend is, are decent in this movie. And that's it. So if if you want to explore kind of like what Argento's work was like after he got out of the supernatural, fantastical, fantastique period, this is the really the start of that. Like where it was just like he was definitely trying to make an American movie with an American cast to appeal to like Americans of that time period in the 90s. And it didn't work as well as he probably thought it would, but it's also not a huge piece of shit. So that's what I'll say. Um, oh, side note to all this too. There's a scene at the end of the movie where the stepdaughter is actually dancing, and that's definitely like a big nod to what he's doing. Like she's dancing at the end of the film, and kind of like a free kind of dance, and she actually got killed in a car accident. Like I think right around the time this movie was released too, which is just horrific as well. Okay, so some comments on here. Yes, I got my hair cut. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoy that. Pino Donaggio was the name of the composer of this movie. So there you go. And the mayor says he'll take Minneapolis over Dracula 3D any day. I think just about everybody would. Phantasmat, is it worth owning? Um, because Vinegar Syndrome just put out like a Blu-ray. Yeah, I mean, I would say that it is. Um, I enjoyed it. It's, I can't compare it to anything else that he's done because it's not like the Giallos that he made, and it's not like any of the Three Mothers or anything like that. It's just a standalone thriller. It's his least bloody film since like the very beginning when he was doing, Bird with. I think it might be even less bloody than the Bird with Crystal Plumage and all. Um, but wait, CK sorry says Pita Bread Fettuccine was the original composer for Into the Pit. He really let's see. Aiden really enjoyed it and honestly found it to be the best film he made in America. The film recently served as huge inspiration for James Bond's play. You could totally see that. I don't know though. Like, okay, so if that served as an inspiration for *Malignant*, which I could definitely see, like I was talking about with the doctors and all that shit, and just the way that it's shot, but *Basket Case* had to be an inspiration in some way because it's the same fucking movie. But anyway, I would highly recommend that you buy Trauma. Every time I say trauma, I want to say trauma, just because I'm so used to saying trauma all the time. Um, but that's neither here nor there, because that was 1993's Trauma. Clearly a very personal film to Argento. I think it was a fantasy of his that he was kind of living out, which oftentimes make the best movies. It's just too far away from his normal style of movie to be what I would consider to be great. Um, and then I kind of feel like that because of that, he kind of goes back and does a film closer to what people expected of him at that time, which is 1996's The Stendhal Syndrome. So, oh gosh. This is a movie too that there's quite a few people that say that this was his last great film. Um, who's to say really though? I mean, everybody has a different opinion, but I can kind of get why they would say this one because number one, it's more violent than Trauma. It's more fantastical than Trauma. It's like everything that he probably got criticized about or didn't like about Trauma, he puts into Stendhal Syndrome. Um, yes, somebody said it's a hard film to watch. It's a very hard film to watch, and we'll go into why. Um, right around this time, in both Trauma and the Stendhal Syndrome, Dario Argento decided that it would be a good idea to film a bunch of nude and rape scenes of his daughter. Um, Now, even she has come out and said that this like seriously psychologically impacted her over the years, which I cannot fathom in my own mind doing that like with one of my kids. I don't give a shit if they're adults or like whatever. Like no, you just I don't know how you even go about doing that. Like what kind of mindset you have to be into. Maybe he let somebody else do it. I'm hoping to God that that's the case, but I don't think that's the case because Aja Argento has said that it seriously like fucked her up for a long time. So anyway, you know, Argento has always been controversial. He's had animal deaths and graphic violence, and now this shit that people still talk about with showing his daughter naked and all this stuff all the time. So there's all that, but just be forewarned. That's a very odd part about these two movies about trauma and the Stendhal syndrome, especially the latter. So to get into the Stendhal syndrome, the name comes from a disorder, which is like a psychiatric disorder where when you see great works of art, you become so overwhelmed with them and overpowered by them that you basically become psychotic. And, it's an actual term that someone coined, and it's a lot of people would go to France and Italy and these places that have these great museums and these great art museums, and they would just become so overwhelmed that they would almost be in like a catatonic, psychotic state. Apparently, this happened at some point in time. Um, I can't I can't imagine that, but that's what the film is based on. So at the very beginning of the film, this is one part I love about this film, though. The very beginning of the Stendhal syndrome is very much like the very beginning of Suspiria, in that like you're just with this woman, and she goes into this art gallery, this museum, and she's looking at all these paintings, and then shit just goes crazy, and she starts freaking out, and all these visions and things like that. And I love that part about Argento's movies where it's like an adventure watching these movies sometimes, man. Like you start to watch it and it just can start in the middle of a scene basically, and you don't know what the hell's going on. There's that very nightmarish quality to it where it just drops you right into something that you're not entirely sure what's going on and takes you on this kind of like ride. And he does a great job in the beginning of this film. I think it's like one of the best openings of his films as far as that goes. So you got that all that going on. Anyway, it's interspliced between this. You come to find out that this woman is a cop. She's a female policeman woman. I don't know what to say nowadays. That is hunting for this serial killer, and it just so happens that she also has this Stendhal syndrome where she just can go like loopy. Anytime that she comes into contact with a great piece of art, which that's a pretty cool set piece if you think about it, or a pretty cool plot piece. Sorry, because like anytime she's anywhere, like a hotel or any place, and there's like a piece of art, like it can flip like that, and that's a pretty cool thing. Like to have, like, you never know what she's going to do or when she's going to come in contact with this, and it's going to mess her up throughout the movie. So anyway, she's her purpose is to hunt down this serial killer, but basically it's very odd because he's basically hunting her throughout the whole movie and catches up with her a couple of times in this movie. There's another weird thing about this movie. So in the beginning, he catches up with her and rapes her, and he ends up like, this is a really cool scene where he ends up shooting this other woman, and it like goes through the woman's mouth, and you see like the point of view of the bullet coming out the mouth, and he's like looking through the hole in the jaws and kind of laughing maniacally. And there's some cool like scenes like that, some cool visual scenes. I guess you would call that a gore scene in this as well. Camera work in this is much better than it was in Trauma. Trauma is very much like point and shoot, and this is like he's got all the angles and stuff back. He's shooting from the ceiling. He's shooting through people's faces, like both literally and figuratively. So it's great in that way. But yeah, like people were saying, like there's a lot of those scenes that are really really hard to watch, and then you're like, the movie goes on, and she's kind of traumatized and traumatized, and I think she ends up like changing her identity and her hair and all this shit, trying to get away from all this stuff that's happened to her. And there's also this loose kind of thing where like she's got a doctor or psychiatrist that's like, this Stendhal syndrome is dangerous because you go in and out of personalities and shit like this. So there's kind of like a plot point there that kind of comes into it. But so you go along a little bit, and then he catches up with her again, takes her to like an abandoned cave where all these junkies are hanging out or were hanging out, and then like rapes her and kind of beats her and all this stuff again, except this time she kind of like breaks loose and gets the advantage over him, and goes to town on him as well. And that part is kind of hard to watch too, but it's not the end of the movie. Like you think it's the end of the movie, at least I did, and come to find out that there's a whole other like last act that you may or may not have seen coming based on what you know about the rest of the film. I like this movie better than I did Trauma. I have to say that, and I'm still struggling to say if I like Trauma or not. Like, there's parts of it that I liked and parts of it that I really didn't like. But in this one, I guess that's more balanced. Like, this is a more balanced movie. I will say that. It doesn't go too far into the bad. Like, for instance, in Trauma, where Brad Dourif gets his head cut off and, like, it's screaming as it goes down the elevator shaft and, like, a worst visual effect shit you've ever seen. It doesn't ever get that bad. In fact, it's got some really cool visual effects in it, but I don't know, it doesn't blow my skirt up or anything. It doesn't blow my mind. I don't think that it's like the last great film that Argento did. Would I say that it's a great film? I'd say it's closer to being a great film than something like Trauma or some of the other things that we'll talk about. But it's got better camera work, better cinematography, better gore, a better performance by Asia Argento. It's just all around like a better film, I think. By the way, why the fuck are these movies like 2 hours long too? Like Jesus Christ, that's way too long for some of these movies. Trauma and Stendhal are just way too long. Some comments here real quick. Norm Macdonald mentioned that he suffered from Stendhal syndrome. I mean, I guess it's possible. Such an odd syndrome. Jay says he remembers seeing an Argento quote from Stendhal along the lines of "Fuck America, I'll show them horror," because he's pissed off with the experience of making Trauma. Yeah, I can see this as like a bounce back kind of movie too, where he was like, man, I had a really, really horrible experience. And they probably neutered him, as what they do in all American movies, especially when like, a foreign director tries to come over. They probably did. And he was like, what the fuck are you? Let's show you. Aiden says the ending of Stendhal Syndrome shocked. Yeah, it's got a good ending. Even though you can kind of see. Well, I won't say that. Like, I'll be honest with you, the first time I saw it, I didn't see it coming. But it's very easy to see if you kind of pay attention to the film. But yes, very good ending. Probably better than Trauma too. And yes, I'm saying that I don't hate Trauma. I'm actually saying that I'm trying very, very hard to like Trauma more now. Do I like Malignant more than Trauma? Holy shit, that's a good question. They're both the same type of movie. And by the same type of movie, I mean, like, there's as much bad as there is good in them. Malignant is like what would happen if you took Phenomena and Trauma and mixed them together. So, I would say I like Malignant a little bit better. As hard as that is to say, it's weird to say. So, we're up to 1996. Which, this would have been around the time that Scream hits. And everything moves into an entirely different direction. But the Stendhal syndrome, like I said, it does everything better. As a matter of fact, like another part of it is that Ennio Morricone is back to do the score, which like I said, everything about Trauma he kind of got fucked over with them not wanting to use anybody that he worked with before and have like a more mainstream score. And you don't remember anything about the score in Trauma. It's a horrible, like it really is just not. It's not memorable at all. So yeah. So up next is a film that I absolutely dreaded to talk about because I knew that I would have to go back and I knew that I would have to watch it, and I did. So let's just get into this shit because it actually, believe it or not, after you get out of the 90s and into the 2000s, gets worse. But not much worse than this, really. Depending on how you want to look at it. I'm trying to steady myself here and actually figure out like the year that this movie came out. I mean, whatever year it came out, it was still truly horrible. Okay, so oh Jesus, 1998. 1998. Oh, what a year. So 1998, Dario Argento thought, hey, you know something that's not been done 85 fucking million times is let's do a remake or a reimagining of the Phantom of the Opera. And so he did that. And it's one of the biggest pieces of shit ever made. And I'll tell you the reason. Julian Sands. I've never liked fucking Julian Sands. I didn't like him in Warlock even. And that's like his best movie. It has to be. It's definitely his best horror movie. But Julian Sands is in it. So let's just point out some things. If everybody's familiar with the Phantom of the Opera, I'm praying to God that most people are familiar with just the basic storyline of the Phantom of the Opera. And I would say it's got to be one of the films that's been remade the most times. Here's the problem. The basis, the fucking whole basis of the Phantom of the Opera is that he's disfigured. And the problem with this movie is he's Julian Sands. Just a regular fucking Julian Sands who was raised by rats under a tunnel but is not disfigured whatsoever. And that, my good friends, completely defeats the entire purpose of the Phantom of the Opera. Because Julian Sands can go anywhere, do anything. He's not frightening. There's no need for him to be in this Beauty and the Beast-ish kind of love story if he looks like fucking Julian Sands. But That's not the worst part of this movie. Amazingly, the worst, possibly the worst part of this movie is that Christine, played by Asia Argento, is a psychopathic hoe. So, yeah, in in the original Phantom of the Opera, the one that everybody knows with Lon Chaney and all that shit, the character is horribly disfigured and sympathetic in the fact that he's disfigured, but turns out to be a monster who is kind of irredeemable. But the female protagonist in the film is very likable and kind of just thrown into a series of situations that she has no control over. In this film, she's kind of complicit and a party to the shit that happens in the movie. And she's, like I said, a great big old hoe and psychotic and not a likable character whatsoever. So that's a big, big problem with this movie. Coralina Cataldi Tassani is in this movie again. Wink. So there's there's that. By this time, Daria Nicolodi is not in any of these movies because they had separated because of the aforementioned, I'm pretty sure, Coralina. So the question that you might be asking yourself, is there music in this Phantom of the Opera? No, not in the sense that you're probably thinking of it. It's not a musical in that way. There is some music in it that's reminiscent of the first film. So, yeah. It's awful. I'm not a phantom. I'm a rat. Yeah. He's not a phantom in this movie. Because you can't be a phantom if you don't have a mask. You're not phantoming anything. And you're fucking Julian Sands. I do not understand for the life of me what made Argento make this movie and some of the creative decisions that he made. Like, why? Just why? Like, I mean, I can see, like, for some people, you can stray away from certain things. You can go, take it like a little bit different, in a different direction sometimes. But you can't take the main shit about something and just discard it. It would be like if there's no shark in Jaws, if in Halloween, you didn't have Michael Myers. You can't fuck with something that's that well known in that way. And you can't make all your main characters complete and utter douchebags that just like are not redeemable. So if the question is the Phantom of the Opera as bad as people say it is? Yes. The answer is yes. It's one of the worst. It's not the worst. We'll get into the worst as we get into the end of his career. I still haven't watched Giallo yet, the film Giallo. I hear that that's just about as bad as anything. But I have watched Dracula 3D in preparation for these. And there's other stuff too that comes up. I put it to you this way. I've seen The Card Player. I've seen dude like Hitchcock. I've seen Dracula 3D. It gets bad. I don't think it gets worse than Dracula 3D though. But then again, Giallo. The movie Giallo. How you doing, wet man? I am all the way live. That is true. All right, let's look at some of these comments, questions, random thoughts. Malignant. It keeps coming up too. Malignant police station scene blew my mind. Yeah, like I was on the fence with that movie until that scene, and when that scene happened in Malignant, I was like, yes, I like this movie. I'm going to rewatch this movie. I have rewatched it a couple times now because you just don't see shit like that anymore. Like, people do not make scenes like that anymore in horror films where it's like just so far out there that it's like an Argento movie. Ha! Wink. X-Ray Punch has never seen it due to its reputation. Please don't see it. There's no point. I promise you. Bad part about it is I've got Scorpion Releasing put it out in this amazing package where it looks amazing. Just came back out on Blu-ray. I couldn't fucking get Opera because that went out of print like in 5 seconds. But I've got the fucking Scorpion Releasing of Phantom of the Opera in there. Okay. The very first Phantom of the Opera film I watched was Argento's version. Jesus Christ. I'm sorry. Argento made the wrong kind of classics, remade them. Instead of Phantom and Dracula, he should have done Grimm's Fairy Tales instead. I think that you're right. Like, if you want to see something that was done like that, like a fairy tale that was done in a style that would have been great for Argento, get Synapse Films' Lemura, A Child's Tale. That is a great version of like what could have been. Like, if you're going to make a movie like that, there's a way to make it like a fantasy fairy tale-ish kind of movie. That's the way you do it. You don't do fucking Phantom of the Opera with rats under a tunnel. And Ice Movie says he saw the stage show, and that was enough. I hope it wasn't the stage show of fucking Argento's version, because that would be awful. You'd have to like hide under a bunch of rats for the whole show. The Mayor says, I honestly don't remember anything about this movie. I saw it on VHS when it was first released, and I blocked it from my memory. Yeah, you will do that. Giallo has that unintentionally hilarious yellow dud. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to rent it and watch Giallo with, what is that fucking guy's name, who I can't stand either. The lead actor in that movie. I couldn't stand him before this movie. So, I know I'm not going to like the movie. What the hell was his name? Adrian something. Anyway. Grande's in here. That's awesome. Grande's Graveyard says, I know you're a fellow fan of Mother of Tears. Yes, sir. I mean, it's not much of a spoiler. I've talked about it on here a couple of times. I'm one of apparently a few people that liked and thought that that was a pretty good ending to the Three Mothers trilogy. Mother of Tears, enjoyed the film. I don't understand what all the hate is about that fucking movie. I mean, sit through, Phantom of the Opera, and to a less degree, sit through Trauma, and then watch Mother of Tears, and you tell me, like, which one is a better film. Yes. Jay says he's sorry that I only have Phantom of the Opera and non-opera on Blu-ray. You can't find. Here's the problem. Like, I came a hair of buying that movie for like $100, but if you try to find the new version of Opera, which has been like remastered and has all these features on it and looks amazing apparently, I think Scorpion's the one that put it out. It's like $80 to $100 on eBay. It went out of print like pretty much immediately. It's a 3-disc version. Might have the soundtrack with it, I think. Love to have that if anybody wants to like just buy it and send it to me. Adrian Brody, that's his name. Adrian Brody signed up for Giallo because he didn't see Argento movies after. Probably right. The Mayor says that Lemura desperately needs a Blu-ray or 4K release. Yeah, we talked to Dawn May about that. On the last live stream that we did with him and Slippy. So if you want to go back and look at that and see what he has to say about that. No, please do not. Please do not pick up Argento's Phantom on Blu-ray. Even if you want to complete it, it's not worth it. It's really not. Let's see here. Alpha Romero, which is a great name. Argento went downhill when he gave up the cocaine. Didn't most people, though? I mean, honestly. Dracula 3D coverage is coming soon. I have the Blu-ray. I'm ready for it. Mother of Tears. He says Mother of Tears is honestly the finale of Argento's career, and he loves it warts and all. That's kind of how I feel about it too, to be honest. And then this is a great quote. Mother of Tears is like when an abusive husband brings home a good pizza. Yeah, I guess I could see it. Now that's a remake I want to see. Argento's Phantasm. That would be amazing. Do I like the Two Evil Eyes segment, the Black Cat from 98? Well, I was talking about this at the beginning of the show. Like, I remember, I think CK and I watched Two Evil Eyes when it first came out on DVD. And the only thing I remember about that fucking movie was the scene where the big pyramid thing falls on the guy, and like there's some big scene there. It was like a Savini effect, and I don't remember anything else about it. And I didn't want to do it for this because I didn't get a chance to rewatch it. I don't own it, and also it wasn't a feature length film, so I have to go back and watch it to give you an honest appraisal of that movie. Grande says, random poster question. What is a ballpark price for a Dawn of the Dead one sheet? It's my all-time favorite film. I see the one sheet behind you. I definitely want to get it. You mean that one, or like the green lettered one, or the red lettered one? The green lettered one, when I was collecting posters, which has been years ago, that one was going for $300 to $400. Everything's gone up now, so I'd hazard to guess what the hell it's going for now. You can get the original one sheet with red lettering for a lot cheaper. I would watch Argento's Phantasm too. Aiden says, Two Evil Eyes is average, but it should be awesome considering the directors involved. That's true. So, I mean, I don't know. Since I didn't get a chance to review that, that was the one movie that I didn't get a chance to review. What are your all's opinions of Two Evil Eyes? That's the one that got left out. Like I said, it's not really a full film anyway. I mean, a full Argento film. Interesting fucking idea, though, wasn't it? I mean, to have Romero and Argento. It was kind of like Masters of Horror before Masters of Horror. But to sum it up, the 90s are not as bad as people say for Argento, but it definitely was a decline in the quality of his work. And I would even go so far as to say that the 2000s are much more of a decline in the quality of his work. And that will be made, I think, pretty clear to a lot of people when we go through the later years, part two, the 2000s, which is the last in this series of Finding Argento, which I hate to see it go. But we'll be covering Sleepless, The Card Player, Do You Like Hitchcock, Mother of Tears, and Dracula 3D, and hopefully Giallo, if I can get to see the damn thing before the next time I do this. Okay, so let's see. X-Ray Punch. Ran Two Evil Eyes, and I don't remember jack shit about it. I do not remember liking it. I think that's a pretty fair assessment. The Black Cat is horrible. Stuart did a better adaptation. Romero's segment is bland too. Yeah, that's what I remember about the movie, is it just being kind of bleh. But CK says that he always liked Two Evil Eyes for some reason. not bad, but bland. No. Figuring out Fulci. That would be such a killer gimmick for the next one. Will you do Argento's Masters of Horror episodes? Shit. I didn't even think about that, to be honest. I actually have those, too. Maybe. I might do those. Jennifer and Peltz. We'll see. I definitely will do the rest of them, though. So, anyway. Just like with the rest of his career in the 90s, there's some good stuff. It's very 90s looking. Especially Trauma. Like, if you go back and watch all those movies, Trauma was the one where you could tell, like, there was some interference there where they wanted it to look and play out like every movie that came out around that time period. And it suffers a lot from that because it had a good idea and a really good killer in it. But it's a lot of ups and downs in the 90s for Argento. And some of them are hard to watch, like Family Opera. Some of them are really, really cool to watch, like Stendhal. But, you know, the 2000s, which I'll be covering next, is going to be, it's going to be amazing for better or for worse. And Fingering Fulci would be, yeah. I'll take all name submissions for the Fulci series if I ever decide to do one. But that's it for the 90s version, basically. The late 80s, early 90s version of Finding Argento. We've had some laughs. We shared some times. We've become closer, I feel like. And when I do this next one, which I don't know when the hell it's going to be, I think it's probably going to be the most divisive of any of them. The 2000s, which is the later years part 2, we'll be talking about all those films, like I said. I would love to do a Fulci one. But to be honest with you, like, I don't think I enjoy Fulci's movies as much as I do Argento's. I mean, he had 3 or 4 movies that were outstanding and then like a lot of really bad shit. But maybe. Cronenberg's another one where that would just be a cool series to do. I think about doing that one too. But anyway, if you have any suggestions about what I should do next, leave them in the comments or check us out over at DEADPIT. Check us out at DEADPIT on patreon.com. Check us out at deadpit.com. It's been a lot of fun as usual. It's, like I said, my favorite series to do. We only got one left. It'll probably be within the next 2 weeks. And I appreciate everybody for being in here and everybody that comments. And it makes it a lot easier to do these. We had a lot of people in here, a lot of people commenting. And it's been really cool. X-Ray Punch thinks Cronenberg would be a better choice. Yeah, in a way, I kind of like agree with that. I mean, there's a lot of ideas. I would fucking like to do a Henenlotter retrospective, man. There's some crazy stuff in there, but like that's a guy that nobody ever really talks about anymore. But let me know like what you want, what would be a good one to do, and we shall do it. But like I said, I appreciate everybody. Check us out over at DEADPIT. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up for the month of October. October is our big month, and you know we might get a guest. We might not get a guest. We might get a guest that you would like. We might get a guest that you would not like. I don't know. We're not getting Andrew Bernarski, so I think we can all universally agree that it'll be more liked than that. But just stay tuned is all I can say. But anyway, I'm Uncle Bill, and thank you all for watching. I am out.
Give us the thumbs up.
Up your butt.
Like, subscribe, And if you subscribe, here's something else you can do. Once you subscribe, you can click the bell notification, right? And it'll notify you anytime that Dead Pit puts up new shit.
Or don't. I really don't give a if you do or
I
don't.
want you to. I want you to.
I don't care.
Let's keep our community growing here on YouTube.
I don't like it. I don't want you to touch nothing.
Listen, they need to do that, pal.
No, don't you dare touch it.
Thumbs up. Subscribe. And click that bell. Thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon. DEADPIT on Patreon.com is the only place to check out a complete archive of the old Dead Pit radio shows all the way back from 2005 on, in addition to the midweek shows and fan commentaries, exclusive podcasts, and much more. Dead Pit on Patreon.com if you're interested. Tiers start at only $1.